Hi, and welcome back to Planting Seeds with a Partnership. My name is Amber Green, and I am the Community Awareness Coordinator here at Durham's Partnership for Children. We're so excited that you decided to join us today, and we look forward to your thoughts at the end of this video. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and check the description box for helpful links and resources. All right, enjoy. Today we have Sara Montgomery, and Sara is a nonprofit leader with over 20 years of experience in social justice, movement building, organizing, and community-based policy advocacy. Sara joined the NC Justice Center's Education and Law Project in 2017 and currently serves as co-chair to EveryChildNC, a statewide coalition leading the fight for equitable school funding, using the Leandro court case to organize and build power in communities across NC. Sara is a proud ISLA board member, 2022 Goodman Fellow, and was also honored to receive the 2022 North Carolina Association of Educators President's Award for her advocacy on behalf of NC's public school children. Thank you, Sara, for being here today with me. And was there anything else that you wanted to share about yourself that I might have missed?
Well, thank you, Amber, for having me. I so admire the work of Durham Partnership and just really appreciate the invitation to share a little bit more about the work around Leandro. And the only thing I would add is that I'm also a proud Durham Public Schools parent.
Okay. I didn't know that. So, yeah, that is something to be proud
We're in
about.
sixth grade and third grade, and my husband also teaches sixth grade ELA. So we are in the thick of it.
Absolutely. Well, that is a fun fact. My son, he's actually in school in Wake County, and I used to teach
Nice.
second grade ELA. So we have some similarities in that way.
Fun.
Full circle. We're only a
Yes.
few degrees apart. So let's get right into it. So I wanted to have Sara on the podcast today to chat a bit about Leandro and how one can be an advocate for early childhood education, especially as it relates to the Leandro plan that we are trying to get fully enacted right now. My first question for you is, as with any advocacy effort, we must begin with a sense of its goals. Among these goals, some distinctions are important. What are the long-term goals of the Leandro plan, and what are the short-term goals?
So I'm going to start us off with just kind of doing a recap of what the Leandro case and now the Leandro plan is all about, and kind of where do we find ourselves here in 2023. So it's important to remember that the Leandro plan started because of families, families organizing for better educational opportunities for their children. So we're talking back in the mid 90s, families started organizing in our rural, some of our low wealth, really some of our poorest counties in North Carolina. So we're talking about Halifax and Vance and Hoke and Cumberland and Robeson County. And families came together because they knew that the education that the school districts where their children were was not equal to the education that students could get in more wealthy districts. And why that is because, unfortunately, we rely on local property taxes. That's kind of how we've decided we want to fund public education. So, these families knew that it's very different. The opportunity to support public education looks a lot different, in counties like Robeson and Halifax than they might, in say Charlotte Mecklenburg or Wake, right? So that's kind of the spirit that started off the effort. So these families came together. They sued North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, knowing that our Constitution is really exceptional when you think of other constitutions across the country, state constitutions that provide a protection to every child to receive a public education. That's that product of our Reconstruction Constitution from 1868. It's something that we should really feel proud about as North Carolinians. And those families knew that, per our own Constitution, the state was not doing its job by ensuring equal educational opportunities for every child. So that was in the mid-90s. The case went up the first time to the state Supreme Court, and then it found its way back in 2001 when other districts, urban districts, joined the case as well to say, you know what, we also can't provide educational opportunities for students in our districts because of tremendous funding barriers and the fact that certain students require more resources, right? Certain students are going to need a different approach than this one size fits all. That's just not working. And so the case has been progressing and really been stalled for the last couple of years. We have not seen progress being made in any significant way. We've actually fallen further and further behind in our divestment from public education. And we see as a result that opportunity gaps have actually increased, and more students are not receiving, what they need and the supports that they need from school. So the Leandro plan is a court-ordered plan that really tries to address, what is needed, what is the most urgent type of investment, a type of policies that will, start addressing, these inequities. So it came about because of a comprehensive analysis of public education that was done by some national policy experts from a place called WestEd. And they spent time working in communities and talking to, experts throughout the state to really land on what is a comprehensive framework for both the types of policies that we need to see and also the types of investments. And so that report a few years back is what informed the court order that we now know as the Leandro Plan. And that Leandro Plan is designed to, meet the immediate needs of our students that have been the most harmed, really. We're talking about the students and the families that y'all work with at the partnership, right? So under the Leandro Plan, we would see all eligible students be able to attend NC Pre-K. We would see a quadruple in state funding for Smart Start and the NC Infant Toddler Program. And then when we look at how it would benefit students in K-12, it would ensure that every school has a qualified teacher and principal, that there would be diversity, because we know representation matters and that we are not seeing that reflected in our teacher workforce now. It also addresses not only investing more funding, but how are we distributing those funds, right? How are we ensuring that there's equity and that the students who require more resources and have more needs are also given what they need. And it's also going to overhaul our current assessment framework, because we know that's discriminatory. We know that that is not working for our students. And like I said, it's going to be a tremendous investment for early education, as well as strengthening pathways for college and career, which we know we're also in huge need of. So that is what the Leandro Plan and kind of the Leandro case is right now. We had our third visit up to the state Supreme Court in August of last year. And the Supreme Court found that not only is North Carolina not making enough progress, but it ordered the state to commit the funding necessary to fully implement the Leandro Plan. And we expect, that decision to be fought and to be opposed, because, at its essence, Leandro is about equity. It's about race equity, and it's about ensuring that every child, have what they need to succeed.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That touched on some of my future questions, but it's okay because that gives our listeners just the full spectrum of what Leandro is and how, especially North Carolina folks, how it is affecting them right now. And just to what you said, I used to be a second grade teacher. I was a second grade teacher for 5 years, and I have a 5-year-old now who is in kindergarten. And in those 5 years, they were all spent teaching in North Carolina, and I've seen it for myself. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I went to all Wake County public schools. They were all magnet schools, and when I transitioned from Raleigh, North Carolina to Forsyth County, where I was a teacher, I was astonished what the public schools had to offer. And then I personally started to do research and realized, oh, it's because of the property tax that these schools are so poorly funded, but they're schools still, right? They still have to offer basic things. And I've seen it for myself that they do not. They do not offer some of just the basic things. For example, like having quality text for their students to have access to, having qualified teachers, qualified principals, qualified administration staff as a whole. That means like EC teachers, immersion classes, things that I saw a plethora of in Raleigh, North Carolina, I didn't see in the area that I was teaching in Forsyth County. So all of what you said, and to our listeners, this is really happening. It's not anything new, and it's something that can be fixed and will be fixed. So moving on to my next question, who are the people and institutions that but I guess that should be changed to who do we need to move in order to get the Leandro plan fully enacted?
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. Like that, that shock that folks experience. And I'll just say, like, for a lot of folks across our state, like if you don't have an immediate connection to, if you don't have a child currently in public schools, if you don't have someone who, is an educator or school staff, like working, in the system, it does come as a real shock, just like how, how deep these, these education cuts are being experienced, how demoralizing it is for our professionals to show up and do this job day in and day out, how hard it is for students, particularly, we were in crisis before the pandemic, right? We were in a funding crisis, and we're having a really hard time, understandably, recovering from that because we didn't have the investments in place, to provide those necessary supports. So I would say always, when we talk about, who needs to move on this, I would say, first and foremost, people move policy, right? So it is our goal at EveryChildNC to make sure that folks know about what's at stake here, that they know that there is this case out there. Like Leandro really is the legal vehicle that we have as parents, as we have as students and community members, to enforce our child's education rights. It's what you described, from going from one district to another and seeing, wow, that there's just not enough resources, like the education that a child is receiving is completely different, right? I would say, that goes against our values as North Carolinians. Like we know that is wrong. We know that is not inevitable. We know that is a policy choice. And Leandro gives us the tools to go a little bit beyond that and know that, this isn't just not aligned with our values. This is unconstitutional. And there is something we can do about it. But it's going to take, more folks feeling hopeful that they can influence policy change, to engage in that process, to show up at their local school boards, to talk to folks in their immediate school communities. And ultimately the people we have to push are our lawmakers. It is the North Carolina General Assembly. It is their obligation to uphold our constitutional obligation by providing every child with a sound basic education. So ultimately, the solution lies with them, the problem and the solution. So we really need to be getting, and we know that this is going to be a long fight, Amber, right? I mean, anyone in North Carolina knows that we are not, our state's lawmakers, it's not reflective of people who believe in public education, who believe in the value of educating every child, who believe in an equitable funding for public education. And that's what Leandro seeks to do. It seeks to make sure that we don't have highly resourced schools in one community, and the vast majority of our kids are in under-resourced schools, and they don't have, they just don't have access to those opportunities. So Leandro is about kind of getting everybody up to that constitutional standard, that sound basic education, but it's really designed to go beyond that. It's designed to put us in a position where, every child is given that opportunity. But we know that sound basic is what it sounds like. It represents the bare minimum, the absolute least amount that we expect our state to commit to public education. And so, as advocates, I think, we would all agree that our children deserve the absolute best. They deserve a world-class, high quality and fully equitable education. So that is, ultimately our main goal.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree that our children deserve the absolute best. And that's the point that I was making. Growing up in Wake County, I felt like I had so many opportunities to be my best self, whether that was through the arts, or STEM, or just like my regular classes that I was taking. I had so many opportunities, clubs, so much access to AP, and I was encouraged to go for those classes, to go for the AP, the honors courses, in high school. But going even back to elementary school, we had theater, we had science classes, we had language classes in my elementary school. We had a library, a computer lab. And to me, that was the normal for me as a child growing up in Wake County. However, I saw for myself teaching in Forsyth County that unfortunately, that was not a county I wanted my son to go to public school in. I had to make a choice to, move specifically for that, because the truth is that, well, if you can't afford to pay for an education, which would be, private, what choices are you left with? You have public, you have charter, and charter has, I don't even want to get into that bag of worms, okay? This is not what the podcast is about, but I'm certain that charter is not always the best choice. And so then you're left with choosing a quality public school, or having a quality public school chosen for you based off of where you live. And in my case, that was the choice that I had to make because of the inequity that is our education system in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on to our next question, what has been done already through EveryChildNC or even some of your partners' organizations to equip the messengers? These are the folks on the ground, both in terms of information and to increase their comfort level as advocates.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So we've really set out at EveryChildNC to create this network of of advocates, and we're talking about parents, family members, educators, students, community members, folks that believe that this issue is important and understand that it's going to take all of us, to continue pushing and demanding more for our students. So we really approach this as, if you don't need to know a lot about Leandro, Leandro can be intimidating. It can feel like there's all these like qualifiers. You have to know about this court case. And, that our goal is, yes, we want people to know about what Leandro means and, to feel confident in talking about it and feel confident in, in advocating. But we also know that, if folks are showing up, if they're asking questions, if they're looking around, if they're connecting with other parents in their school communities to see what they can do to improve things, they're advocating. And all of that advocacy, all of those contributions is valuable and it's necessary. So we listen to our partners. We launched as a coalition in 2020, and that was really after months of organizing, of figuring out how we can hold all of these different, priorities and these different needs in a single coalition with a shared goal of advocating for equitable school funding and using the Leandro case, to organize our communities. So a couple of the tools that we've developed together, we have broken down, the big, intimidating, full investment of the Leandro plan, that multi-billion-dollar 8-year plan. We've really tried to make it accessible and help it connect with the issues that folks are actually experiencing in their child's school. So we've created Leandro District one-pagers, and these are designed for folks to understand what is the impact of Leandro, what are children in my school district owed? Because again, Leandro's not a hypothetical. Leandro is meeting our own state's constitutional standard. It is not optional. It is not negotiable. It is what we have to do. If we care about getting this right, if we care about children, if we care about public education. So, for instance, for Durham, if you look at what children are owed in the K-12 years, children in Durham are owed over $70 million. And that is when the Leandro plan is fully enforced and fully funded. And that would represent an increase of 32% in our local school budget. And we are very lucky in Durham that, our community has demonstrated commitment to public education. We allocate more of our local dollars to support public education than any other district. And that's to fill the gaps, in funding that the state hasn't committed, right? So Durham has taken that stand. Durham has done that. Not every district, obviously, can do that. Like, as you mentioned before, you just don't have that local tax base. You just don't have those local dollars. And if you look at the impact in Durham County for early education, we'd have an additional $36 million to invest in children under 5, and that would be 710 more slots for NC pre-K. It would represent over 362% increase in funding for Smart Start, and over 2,000 more children in the infant toddler program. So it would be transformational. And that's important for us to remember. Sound basic, just meeting our own, standards, would be transformational for every child. And that's just in Durham. So we have that information, we have that data, we have those talking points for advocates in every single district across our state, because Leandro will benefit every child. But it's also important to remember that Leandro was designed intentionally to support the children who have been most harmed by this disinvestment in public education and these harmful policies, right? So we're talking about, children from low-income households, children from rural counties, low-wealth counties, Black and brown and students of color have been harmed by racial discrimination. We're talking about multilingual learners, English learners, students with disabilities, and the children who haven't had opportunity to access early childhood opportunities, right? So that is really who Leandro was designed for. But it is true that every child in every district will benefit from Leandro.
So tell me, where can this information be found?
So we have everything on our website, EveryChildNC.org.
Okay.
We're trying to ensure that all our content is available in English and Spanish. That is an ongoing goal that we have. We are a bilingual space, so we have monthly partner meeting. We do offer Spanish interpretation for that. And we have, again, like all of these resources are partner developed in collaboration with the folks actually advocating and doing the work and showing up in their communities. So we have an explanation, a little bit more information about the Leandro plan itself. We have a whole bunch of really cool video resources as well. If you look at our YouTube page or our Student Voices section, and then importantly, we have our Take Action. And that's where folks can get involved in influencing their local decision makers as well as elected officials at the state level.
Thank you. So that actually takes me to my last question. So just a reminder, all of this information can be found at EveryChildNC.org.
Yes.
And I will leave links to all of that which you listed, including you all's YouTube channel, in the description box of the podcast. And so you mentioned Take Action, and that was going to be my last question. Like, what are the first steps, or what is the first step that someone listening can make in order to support the Leandro plan and or just to become an advocate for the Leandro plan as it relates to education, early childhood education, or just they're a parent and their child is about to enter school. They don't know anything. What is their first step? What would you suggest?
Well, I would just say for folks listening, thank you. This is advocacy, right? The first step is informing ourselves, right? Talking about this with folks we're close with in our family, friends, folks in our school community. It does not have to be this way, right? This is a choice. And we can choose something different. We at EveryChildNC, we have a different vision for North Carolina, where every child is worth that investment. And we're not going to stop, fighting. This is the issue that we feel like is most important for our families, for our students. You can take action immediately. You can reach out to your lawmakers, ask them to fully fund the Leandro plan. We have a petition around the proposal to cancel out the corporate income tax, which we know would be really devastating for our ability to continue to fund public education. We also have the opportunity to host the short documentaries, which you all put on that amazing event a couple weekends ago here in Durham.
Yeah.
And we've made that accessible to anybody who wants to host a screening either online or in their community. We also are influencing decision makers in our local districts. So Durham is one of a couple dozen districts who have passed a local resolution. And even though we know that it's the state's job to fund Leandro, this gives an opportunity for school board members, local county commissioners to demonstrate that they support the Leandro plan
Yeah.
And that they really need those funds to be released from the state. And we have opportunities for family members, for students, for folks that want to learn a little bit more about how to best advocate. But again, everything that folks can contribute to this fight is necessary and it's valuable. So there is, no effort is too small. We will work with folks to figure out, how to tell this story and how best to show up for our kids.
Well, thank you. And I feel like you are right. Listening to the podcast is a great first step. If you are listening, thank you. And I appreciate you so, so much for sharing such valuable information today. Are there any final words that you wanted to tell our listeners about before I let you go?
Just that you are not alone. If this issue can feel really isolating and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And I just want you to know that you have a network of other parents, family members, of concerned folks that are here to advocate alongside you. So please just continue to engage and join the fight.
Thank you. We are indeed in this together. And I appreciate you so much once again for making time to be here with me this morning. And I will leave the information for our listeners so that they can too join in on this great information, join in and become an advocate if they are not already. You are now from listening to this podcast. And once again, Sara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amber.